comments for this meetup. If you're ever at home, oh man, I wish I could have made it to that meetup. Well, you should be able to see it. And we are live, it says.
Okay.
Unless that red either means recording or not.
Or maybe it's an admonition to live. But,
That's right. That's right. Well, here's what I'm going to do, because there's a funny thing about sharing your screen with Google Hangouts. It does a cascade effect.
Oh,
so I have to minimize this.
Okay.
Actually, up here. Bear with me for a second.
Mm-hmm. Bravo.
This should do.
Okay. Great. Okay. Hey, so thank you all very much for the opportunity to come and talk. A couple of caveats about this presentation. First, you should all know that none of this is my creation. All of this is information that I've gleaned from reading and various things. I've assembled it here. There are two books primarily that this is based on. One is called Fluent Forever, which I'm sure many of you are already familiar with. Another one is called Moonwalking with Einstein, which is actually a book about memory. So we called this Achieving Fluency, and the original idea was to talk about Fluent Forever, but 20 minutes, never going to get there. So what I've done for this presentation is taken one tiny little piece out of the larger body of work and tried to focus on that. And the focus on that is going to be memory. And it's pretty important when you think about what it is we do as language learners. And we're going to talk about that. But before we get into the presentation, I'm going to take my name tag off. And I want to ask you all a question. Who here is brave enough to admit the social faux pas that you don't remember my name? I've heard it a few times. You've seen it on the name tag. I've taken the name tag off. Hi. So who doesn't remember? Show of hands. It's okay. No offense taken. Very good. 1, 2, 3. All right. So here's a rhetorical question for you. Why don't you remember my name? And I'll answer the question for you because I'm afraid of where the answers might go otherwise. There's no reason for you to remember my name. We're not built to memorize things in abstraction very well. Phone numbers? Anyone struggle with phone numbers? Okay. When you go to a networking event or a party, do you kind of have to really focus on remembering names? Absolutely. In fact, people write whole books about memorizing names. Now, let's turn the conversation a little bit on its head. And let me ask you, how many people used a navigational aid to get to the library tonight? Okay. A minority of you. Most of you just knew where to go. You got in the car, you drove. And how many of you who used a navigational aid, a map or a GPS, used it for only part of the way? In other words, you knew basically where you were going, but then you used it maybe for the last part of the trip. Anyone? Okay. Okay. So here's an interesting paradox. On the one hand, something like a name is only important, maybe if it's your boss or your spouse or someone that you come into contact, but a route that you drive casually, no problem. Well, the reason for this is we were evolved to remember things like where to find food, where we got into trouble, where we live, where we have shelter for the night. So this kind of sets up the quandary that we have as language learners about doing a better job of remembering the language that we're trying to speak. And this is not just vocabulary, but it's grammar, it's rules, it's social norms, the whole kit and caboodle. So what I'm going to try and focus on is kind of giving us a few levers to come at that. And again, virtually all of this is coming from one of the two books that I mentioned. Okay. So this is a quote from I've forgotten which one I clipped this one.
I don't know if that's
Yeah, it might be at the bottom of the slide, but this is coming from Moonwalking with Einstein. So it turns out that the memory function in the brain is mediated primarily by two different mechanisms. One is the hippocampus, which is kind of a map, if you will, and the other is the amygdala, which we're probably familiar with in terms of the fight or flight response, but is also helpful as a filter for us and is sort of an amplifier for emotion. We're going to come back to that, and I promise you that's as sciencey as this gets. Yes, it is. It's part of the reptile brain. That's absolutely correct. That's why it wasn't. Okay.
Surprise.
So we're going to do a little bit of an exercise now. And what it is that I'm going to show you a list of 10 words that I've chosen at random. I'm going to give you 60 seconds to look at the list, and then I'm going to remove the list, and I'm going to give you 30 seconds to write as many of them down as you can. So
pass the paper out.
Yeah. Okay. And so this is just a casual thing. Don't get real competitive on it. No one's scoring them. But anyone who gets all 10 words gets free fluency.
Well, isn't there an allowance for age?
No, especially not an allowance for age. I'll put this back on. Okay, so let me get my timer set up. Does everyone have a piece of paper and a pen?
1 second.
Yep, no worries. I'm going to get my...
So we're not writing anything.
You're not writing anything yet. I'm going to give you 60 seconds. If I can find my timer on here.
They never win.
No, I'm going to time it on my most expensive stopwatch in the world. Okay, everybody ready? I hope this doesn't come up one word at a time. It didn't. Go ahead. Whoops, that's 20 minutes. I don't want 20 minutes. There we go. Get an extra few seconds. Okay, that's 30 seconds. Start writing. Okay, pencils down. How'd you guys do? All right.
But I don't write that.
Okay, yeah, that's great. That's great. How effortful was that for you to get 9? How effortful was it for you? Did you really have to like apply yourself, or was it casual? You had to apply yourself. Okay. Anyone get around 4? All right, you all did better than 4? Okay, one person with 4. So working memory is about 4 plus or minus. And this is why we have phone numbers that are in chunks of 3 and 4 to help you remember that. Sometimes people get all 10. How many people got the bottle of Fantastic? Okay, virtually everyone. Why is that? Well, it was longer and it was very specific. And hopefully it conjured up an image in your heads about what was going on. Okay, so now we're going to talk about something else. This is a technique called the memory palace, and some of you may be familiar with this already. This actually goes back to ancient Greece. This was invented by Simonides in ancient Greece, and it is a way of memorizing long, you can memorize poetry this way, lists, if you wanted to do the presidency of the United States or monarchs of a particular country rather. I've got corporate on the brain today. So the technique is very simple. You're going to imagine for yourself a room in a house or an apartment or someplace that you're very familiar with. Now, this could also be a route. It doesn't have to be a room or a house. So, for example, when I was living in Philadelphia, I was making almost weekly trips to Atlanta, and one of the routes that I took was my route into the Philadelphia airport, which was almost the same every time, and then my route out of the Atlanta airport to my rental car. 2 subways, by the way, in Atlanta. No kidding, to get to the rental cars. And the idea is that you're going to take each item on the list and place it somewhere on that route or in that apartment. So if it's a room, you may pick a corner, or you may pick a desk or a bed. And the thing is, don't just put it there, but give it something vivid as a hook. So those of you with dirty minds, you just come into your own, go for it. Sex is a very good way of sort of amping something up so that it will be remembered. So is humor. So those things are about food. Absolutely. Anything that you want to do, go for it. So the idea then is that you're going to look, this is going to be a completely different list of words. There's no bottle of Fantastic on here. These are really generic words. You're going to look at the list, and while you're looking at the list, put them in the image, and then we're going to do the same thing. I'm going to stop, and you're going to get another 30 seconds to write them down. So let me just reset my timer, and whoops, here we go. Go. Okay, start writing. Okay, pencils down. How'd you do this time? 8. Was it higher than the last time? And was it easier than the last time? No, not easier. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, right. That's an excellent point, because that's really, in some respects, what it's going to come down to. Okay, so we're going to take a quick break here, And I had in my bag. Oh no, can you? There's a bag in there. No, it's plastic. That's it. Thank you. Okay, I have a surprise for you. Okay, now the surprise was supposed to be. Well, yes, it is. Scarlett Johansson was going to come in and share with us some techniques about how she memorizes her lines. And I reached out to her a couple of times and I got one of these things called a restraining order. So that wasn't going to happen. What I did bring was some chocolate. And these are this is dark chocolate. Help yourself. If you have a problem with sugar, I have you covered. These are sugar-free coffee candies. So if you can't do sugar, please just pass these around. So why am I doing this? Well, because I like you, and because it's getting close to Valentine's Day. And by the way, this is not leftover Christmas chocolate. So surprise, it turns out, is a very helpful element in learning. And there have been studies that have been done that indicate that an act of surprise, and it has to be a good surprise, not, hey, your dog died or anything like that, is very helpful in boosting learning and memory at the same time. Now, as learners, it's going to be very hard for you to surprise yourselves, but you're in a situation where you're teaching others or working with others. If you add an element of surprise, it could be a joke, it could be a YouTube clip, it could be a comic in the middle of something, you're actually going to boost capacity for learning. So similarly, laughter is another good way to do that if you have an opportunity. So just a little aside as we move forward. So you're probably wondering, okay, so how does this apply to the nitty-gritty of what we do as we learn languages? So most of you, I'm guessing, are using flashcards of some sort. Is that true? Okay. So flashcards can be very tricky, and you'll notice if you read the Moonwalking book, they talk about flashcards and they have this phrase, the professional mnemonists, I always trip over that word, call it drill and kill. And this is where you're sitting there with your flashcards over and over and over again, and you don't seem to learn anything. And what you're doing actually is you're reading those flashcards, you're not recalling them, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. You want to invest in your flashcards to make them come to life. One of the ways that you do that is you use sounds and you use images. Now, this is something that Gabe Weiner in Fluent Forever goes into great detail about. And what he is suggesting is using a website like forvo.com to get a pronunciation of the word you're trying to learn. So Forvo is free. And if you sign up, you can actually download MP3s of a word being pronounced. You can choose the pronunciation that you like based on the country. So for example, if you're learning French, you can choose French Canadian, or you can choose French from one of the countries in Africa or France. And you want to put that in your flashcard so you can hear it when you're reviewing it. The other thing that I think is very clever that he does is he says, okay, if you're going to get an image, go to Google Images, but don't go to the US version of Google Images. Go to the Google Images of the country, of the language that you're starting to learn. And he makes a very good case for there being a difference between, say, an American cat and a French cat. And it has to do with the sensibility of the country that you're in and the types of images that they like to put up. Now, some people don't use computers for this. Some people use flashcards, and you can still do this with flashcards. It's going to take more time. You're going to work harder, but ultimately you're going to learn the lessons more deeply because you're making that much more effort. So to Benita's point earlier, you tried harder, and that's going to pay off. That kind of effort and input when you're learning a language is actually going to be helpful to you. Well, you can't put a sound on your card, but you can put an image on your card. That image can be, so you could look, say, in Paris Match, for an image that you associate with that flashcard. Don't use the library's copy of Paris Match. They won't like it when you go in with the scissors. But you get your own copy, and they'll, Oh, FORVO, and that's actually in the handout. FORVO.com, and it's free. It's a fantastic resource. There is a handout, yes.
There's always a handout, by the way, starting in 2015. Just thought you should know. I find it always helps. Free handout?
Free handout, right. We were handing out Fluency earlier. Okay, so here's another tip that coming from Fluent Forever that he feels very strong about. Create your own decks, right? You can go, and this is especially true of I've noticed with a lot of the Asian languages, you can download someone else's deck and start studying that. What's wrong with that? It's generic, and there's nothing personal about it. So here's an important point. When you add a personal connection to a card, and you are 50% more likely to recall it, according to Gabe Weiner. So what do we mean by personal connection? So let's say that I'm learning the word cat in another language. So chat in French, masculine, you're going to put a little M on there for M. You're going to need a picture of a cat. Well, I'm not going to go to Google for that picture because I have a cat. I have a cat that I love. I'm going to get a picture of my cat. I'm going to put it on my card, and along with the description of the word, and never put the word in English on your card. There should be no English or whatever your native language is on your card. You don't want to translate. You want to think in the other language. So you've got the picture of the cat. I'm going to put the cat's name. In this case, it was named by my mother-in-law. The cat's name is Gray. Very creative name. May she rest in peace. But, I still love this cat. And so I put masculine, Gray, picture of the cat. I know it's chat.
What about abstractions, or is that
We're getting there. We're getting there. That's the next bullet. Okay. Now, I will admit that I'm a little old for Sesame Street. And by that, I mean that I was already of a certain age when Sesame Street arrived on TV, a little too old to use it as a child. However, I'm an admirer of what they do. This episode brought to you by the number 4, woo! And they make a whole big thing about the number 4. They make up stories, there are colors, there are songs, there are images. You need to do the same. So how would you do this? So let me think. Anyone speak Italian here or know Italian? Number for 7?
Sette.
Sette. Thank you. What do we do with sette? Sette. Te Leone, on the set of Madam Secretary. Okay? You need to go there, and you need to invest and create a mental picture for yourself, and then put a Q on that card. Sette. Oh yeah, Te Leone on the set of, that's how you deal, one of the ways that you deal with abstracts when you're creating your flashcards. Now, in the book, he's got a lot more information. So for example, in German, I think we have masculine, we have feminine, and we have neuter. I don't speak German, okay? That is a whole lot of complexity there that doesn't exist in English today because we don't have that. It exists to a limited degree in French and Spanish and some of the Romance languages with masculine and feminine.
And in the pronouns.
Yes, correct. So there are methods in the book that will help you deal with that, and much more complexity as well. We're not going to cover it here because we have basically 20 minutes. So again, another plug for the book. You want to make this as flamboyant as you possibly can because that's what's going to make it memorable. Go ahead.
I teach at the vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
And I do have a book that's vocab pictures.
Mm-hmm.
So like the word accolade, you could have somebody at a lemonade stand with a big award on his chest.
Mm-hmm.
With a big thing of lemonade
Yes.
in front of him. And say he got accolades for his lemonade.
That's great.
And then you'll always remember that.
Yeah, yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect.
That's what it is.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about what it is we're doing when we're studying our cards. So reading something and recalling it are actually two different things as far as your mind is concerned. When you're reading something, you're absorbing information, and there is a filter in play, and generally it is a more passive, as far as your brain activity goes, activity than actually recalling something. And what a lot of people do with their flashcards, whether it's on a computer or in person, is they're flipping them. Yeah, okay, okay, okay. This is how people study for exams, and it's a very hard way to learn a subject. And it's a great way to fail a test if you're just, yeah, okay, got it, yep, got it. What you want to do is actually remember to actively recall a piece of information. So anyone have this situation where you've watched a film or you're talking with someone about a film and you're trying to remember the name of that actor? It's called tip of the tongue syndrome, okay? Who was it who played, or you're trying to remember the plot. And I just went through this with my wife last night. The movie was from 1960. No, we're not that old. The Apartment was with Jack Lemmon, Shirley MacLaine, and who was the bad guy? The guy who did My Three Sons. Well, eventually we got it. It was Fred MacMurray. Okay. He was the bad guy. You got to watch it for that. Okay, so what happens when you pull something out of your brain like that, there is a neuronal connection that is this is where I get on thin ice because I'm not a scientist or an expert, but I'll try and describe it. There is a neuronal mapping that allows you to pull that out, but at the same time you're storing it again. And what you're storing it with is the room you were in, the person you were with, all of the information here and now that you're kind of putting it back in its place. And all of that extra information helps you reinforce the memory so that it's easier to pull out the next time. Now you notice how quickly I got Fred MacMurray tonight because I spent so much time struggling with it last night. This is a good argument if you're studying for something, of studying in different environments, because it will, in very subtle ways, this is not going to get you to pass the exam, but in very subtle ways, it's reinforcing, it's adding information to the memory so that it is easier to retrieve the next time. So the idea, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more in just a minute, is to recall rather than review. Don't just sit there and read. Make yourself think about what it is, and the way to do that is to make it hard. We're going to talk about spaced repetition in just a second. Okay, what is spaced repetition? Anyone here using it? Okay, what is it?
Well, they start off with one phrase, and then like 2 or 3 phrases later, they come back to that phrase.
Okay, to some degree that's correct, that's accurate. What they do though, go ahead Jermaine, you wanted to say something. Yes, go ahead. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. You can build a logic into it. I'll see this more. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's yes. So Anki does this, and we'll talk about Anki. I'm going to skip ahead to another. So go ahead, Esther. Mm-hmm.
I used to be excellent at remembering characters
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and literature,
mm-hmm.
etc., and names of actors. And now I'm terrible.
Mm-hmm.
With more age, I'm 72. So I just wonder why more age
So actually,
What has interfered?
I will tell you the answer that I've heard. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't even play one on TV. Now, my mother is 91 years old, and she complains bitterly about this.
Yes.
And frankly, as I age, I have a little more trouble
Right.
pulling.
So I'm in between
So
two ages.
what Dr. Art Markman at the University of Texas in Austin has said about this is that it's a retrieval issue. And that is that as you get older, there is a theory at least that everything that we come across in our lives, we store. It's all there, but not all of it is easily accessible. And as we collect more and more information as we get older, it becomes harder and harder to put your hand on the right piece of information. So a way to think about this is that you've got a file cabinet, and it's got no dividers, it's got no sections, it's just you get a piece of paper, it goes in at the end, it goes in at the end. And a lot of times you can reach in and you know where the one you want, names, things that are close to you, things that are important, you know where they are. But other ones you're kind of looking, you don't know, you pull something out, no, that's not it. And so this is the explanation. Too much stuff.
Or with some kind of.
Yeah. And so it becomes retrieval.
I also, if you have dementia, I do that.
Uh-huh.
That's what I didn't want to hear.
Uh-huh.
Because all you remember is stuff from 30 years ago. You don't remember what you have the rest of
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, there's also that which I'm waiting to hear about. But
Yeah, it'll be quick. Yeah. We're close to the end. Yeah. Okay. So we covered this point already. Let's talk about these last two slides because we're running out of time. And this is really actually the payoff. If you look at the curve on the bottom, ignoring the recall practice, this is the forget curve. This is if you learn something, for example, the information that I'm giving you now, within 10 years, it'll be all gone, but really most of it will be gone within the next day. That's working memory. The trick with SRS, as Jermaine was telling us a moment ago, is to recall it just before or just after it leaves your brain. So if you forget it, if you get a card and you don't know what it is, look at the answer, because as soon as you get the answer, you bounce right back up to the top here. And so this is the timing aspect of using a spaced repetition system and why it's so important. And so this last slide here shows you how a spaced repetition system like Anki can basically reinforce information such these gaps between the recalls are the gaps that Anki is presenting to you. It's giving you a flashcard based on whether or not you got it right or whether or not you found it was easy, hard, or you missed it completely, when to show you that information, and notice that that curve is going up. And this is why we say that this is a system for fluency, because if you do this for 30 minutes every day, and you can do this with vocabulary, you can do it with grammar, there are some very creative ways that he applies this in the book, you're going to become fluent very quickly. Now, you still have to do the work, as we said, but you still have to talk to people and do the immersion thing. But in terms of the heavy lifting of memorizing all of those words, this is the system that's going to get you there. So that's it. I think we timed it well. We're at the end of our session. Questions?
Maybe time for one question. I think they might come in. I don't know if there's anyone coming in after.
Okay. Well, they're going to have to get through me first, and I do have chocolate. So.
Excellent. Maybe a question or two.
I've heard, I was in a contemporary course in
Mm-hmm.
summer, and they were talking about this suspension of disbelief.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of this?
Well, I know what suspension of disbelief is. It has, but I've usually heard it in the context of theology. So,
theater too.
or what?
Theater.
Or in theater, right? Oh, with movies, yeah. Okay.
This is why some people remember easily
Mm-hmm.
songs and dialects.
Okay, I see where you're going. It's a very good point. I hadn't considered that, and I appreciate your mentioning it. It's definitely You make a very good point. Yeah, you're suspending disbelief and you're suspending plausibility at the same time. Yeah, good point.
One more.
Sure.
Neither of those books address an issue that I run into, which is memorization of burnout. It's not that I have trouble following the words, because I study every day, so I'm studying my vocabulary is expanding. But my God, it is so boring.
Yes. So actually, Fluent Forever does address that because there's a whole underlying premise in that book that it should be fun. And it shouldn't be so full of exertion. And he does talk about ways to make it fun. Now, caveat: what Mr. Weiner considers fun may not be fun for you. And so I think it's worth looking at the book for that reason alone. And he does a much better job of explaining it than I do. So we have handouts for you. Both books are in the handouts, as well as the website Forvo, a link for Anki. I hope that you'll consider, if you're going to buy the book, I put in, well, this is not electronic, but I put in links for 3 of the area's best independent bookstores. Of course, you can buy it on B&N or Amazon as you choose, but I'm hoping someone will choose to support the locals. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. I appreciate the opportunity to come here and present. Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Go ahead and get my phone. Thanks.
Everybody, I'm going to wrap this thing up here. Great, did not present to everybody. Okay, so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome.